And ladies and gentlemen, we'll be starting just a minute or two. There is a sign-up sheet at the podium. If you want to speak to these bills, please get the sign-up sheet. Thank you. Okay, if you everybody take their seats, and then we'll start the meeting here. I'd like to call the meeting of the Special Rules Committee. My very first Special Rules Committee, the chairman, so it's kind of a neat deal for me. But I do appreciate call this meeting to order. I'd like to start with a word of prayer. Mr. Representative Donahue, do you mind saying a word of prayer for us?
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we lift you up, and Lord, we praise your name. We pray that you be with each person here, their families as we're away, that you'll watch over and protect them. We pray for hurt, that you'll heal them. Heavenly Father, you'll hold them. Give us wisdom in the things that we do today. Help us, Heavenly Father, to understand that each thing we do affects somebody. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Very good. Thank you so much. I want to thank all the members of the committee to have shown up to attendance today for your work on this committee. Also want to thank those in attendance for coming today. The first order of business will be to take up the committee rules. There is a committee rule document on your table. It's a quorum of 3 members that we're asking for. Pretty much the same as they were last year. The only change is number 8. We're probably not going to do any subcommittee appointments unless we feel like there's a need to do so. But at this time, we're not going to appoint any subcommittees. It'll take just a minute or two for y'all to look that over and see, just gotta get a motion to approve the rules. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the rules.
I'll make a motion.
Have a second? Okay, sorry. Any questions about the rules? Number 4?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just wanted to make sure that a quorum is going to be 3 members. That's the first?
That's right. That's what it was last year.
About how many do we have on the committee?
There's about 15 or so. We can change that if you'd like to. What would you suggest, Colonel?
I would recommend that we do change it, and again, I'm not sure what the number should be.
There's about 25 on the committee. There are, yeah.
How many?
25, believe it or not. If y'all want to change it, we can, but that means everyone has to be here when we have a committee meeting.
Well, I think that's why we need to have, why we have the committee meetings, and I would agree. But I would think that three, we may need to raise, I would prefer to raise that number now to I just jumped right at.
Sure, go ahead.
I'm not sure what number that should be, but based on the number of 25 on the committee, even if we just went, maybe half of that, 12, and maybe even less than that, maybe 10 or 8.
For that, but right now, we have 8 people. Does anyone else want to address
8,
this? Number 3.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you have any historic data which suggests how many people generally show up at this committee out of the 25? Do you have any idea what generally
I
shows
do
up?
not have any historical data, no, sir. I'd be willing to, number 22?
No, I'm sorry, that's.
We could, okay, number 3.
At the appropriate
Beverly?
time, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make an amendment to number 1 to say that the quorum for Special Rules Committee shall be 8 members.
Okay, we have a motion that we'll amend the Special Rules Committee rules to number 1 to 8 members. Do I have a second on that? Okay. All in favor of the amendment, say aye. All opposed, say nay. Okay, we've amended the Special Rules Committee rules to number 1. There'll be a member of 8 members for a quorum. Do I have a motion to, do I have another question?
No, I wanted to,
Representative
at the
Prince?
proper time, make a motion that we accept the rules with the amended, with the rules as amended, as our rules for the 2019.
Okay, no, the motion to, this time is the proper time, so we have a motion to accept the rules with the amended rules for Special Rules Committee. You have a second? Can I have a second? All in favor say aye. All opposed say nay. Okay, the all ayes carry it, so we'll have the special rules has been approved. The legislation that we'll be taking up is we have 5 bills, so we hope we do about 10 minutes or so per bill. What's that? We're only considering 2 for vote. That's going to be HB 376 and HR 239. And hearing only will be HR 38, HR 196, and HR 291. The reason why is because for the study committees, I'll be given a number or so by the speaker about how many study committees we'll be doing. So I want to make sure we get the best ones out. So we won't be doing a vote today on HR 38, HR 196, or HR 291, but we will have discussion today. So the first bill we'll hear today is HB 376 by Representative Sherry Gilligan. Wherever you're comfortable.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to bring to you House Bill 376. It is, a simple little bill. So you are looking at LC 289043, correct?
That's correct.
Everybody has that? And when I say it's a simple little bill, there is one change and one change only, and that occurs when we're talking about line 23 and 24. We are adding code 1-2-23, which will now designate September 1st as Childhood Cancer Awareness Day here in the state of Georgia. Typically, the very first question I've received has been, why September 1st? September is the National Childhood Cancer Awareness Month in the United States. Typically, the governor will do a proclamation sometime during the month designating that month. But what we are wanting to do is to add this particular day into the code. It does not give you a day off. It is not extra pay. It is a designation. By the way, in case you're wondering, Georgia currently designates 15 days in code. Some of those days are really memorable, like Bird Day. We also have the Bill of Rights Day, which is, wonderful. School Bus Drivers Appreciation Day, Purple Heart Day. So we also honor Bill Elliott. So these are the kinds of days that we currently have. 15 of them I'm asking to designate September 1st, as I said, as Childhood Cancer Awareness Day in Georgia. This will not detract from the governor's proclamation that will be done. This is actually an additive. So then people are wondering, why do we want to add a day? The most important thing is to bring awareness to childhood cancer, pediatric oncology, if you want to use the medical term. And just to give you an idea, each year, 15,000 plus children will be diagnosed. So imagine those parents of 15,000 plus children hearing your child has cancer. It is the #1 cause of death by disease for children under 19 years old. That means you can take every other disease out there. Heart issues, diabetes, mellitus, you can take AIDS, you name the disease, add them all together, and it's still lower than the cause of death by cancer, by disease in these children under 19 years old. To give you a little bit more information, childhood cancer, I keep saying that word, but if a child is diagnosed with cancer, this is a lifelong diagnosis, even if they survive. The survival rate is about 12%. 1 in 8 children will not survive the disease. But if they do, 60% of them will have later effects, to include heart damage, second cancers, lung damage, infertility, cognitive impairment, growth deficiencies, and hearing loss. We do not hope to take away from anything that goes on in October when it's Pink Ribbon Month, but we certainly want Gold Ribbon Month to have a little bit more awareness, to bring just a little bit more to the research and care and need for our children. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Representative Gilligan. I know that your family's been affected by cancer quite a bit, and I sure appreciate this testimony. Appreciate the bill that you've brought to me. Does any member of the committee have a question for Representative Gilligan? Number 22.
Thank you, and how are you doing? You
I'm
okay?
wonderful.
Tell me a little bit, what's the cost for doing this?
0.
So
The-
basically, we've looked at this, and by doing this, there's not like most things we do down here, there is a cost. There is 0 cost.
Well, when we have to print out the code, we have that cost. This will be one extra line in that code. So I guess if you wanted to calculate that cost into the web server,
A little bit.
but that's it.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Donahue. Any other questions for Representative Gilligan? Okay, next I'd like to recognize Ms. Kendall Chamberlain to speak to the bill. And could you please state who you're from and if you're opposed to the bill or for the bill?
Yeah, I'm a freshman at Kennesaw State University. I'm actually in favor of the bill. I asked Representative Gilligan to carry the bill for me. When I was a freshman in high school, my best friend died of pediatric cancer. That was when I started learning about the reality of childhood cancer, the fact that it gets less than 4% of all federal cancer funding, leading to only 3 new drugs being approved for children in the last 20 years. And as Representative Gilligan mentioned, that lack of funding has led to children developing, 2 out of 3 will develop a chronic illness or secondary cancer as a result of these outdated treatments. My best friend was one of them. She fought cancer once after 5th grade. She had Ewing sarcoma, which is a childhood bone cancer, in her back. She fought for a year very hard, went into remission, lived about a year cancer-free, and it came back. When it came back, it had spread to her lungs, and what I didn't realize was that she actually was considered stage 4 at that point. So I went my entire 8th grade year and freshman year of high school, or beginning of freshman year of high school, not knowing this, but my best friend was quite literally dying of cancer. I saw her go in and out of the hospital, each time thinking she'll recover. She'd go into the PICU unit, but she'd pull through because she was a fighter. Her name was Sydney, and her slogan was Sydney Strong, because she was so terribly strong against this disease. But the hard thing is it doesn't matter how strong you personally are, that childhood cancer doesn't discriminate. Cancer itself doesn't discriminate. And you can have the greatest willpower, but if you don't have the correct medical advances to fight that, you're not going to be able to beat it. And on November 28th in 2014, she took her last breath, and I lost my very best friend. It has been a long road coming back from that, but one of the things that really helped me was advocating for childhood cancer, getting involved in organizations such as the Raleigh Foundation for Childhood Cancer Research, who funds cancer funding for children's cancer nationwide and advocates to Washington, to our legislators, to try to get more awareness and funding for this disease, as well as just volunteering for events with children and getting to know them. And in the last several years doing so, I have known 3 to 4 additional children that I've gotten close to and subsequently lost to this disease, and many others that are facing some very severe and heartbreaking ramifications and consequences. My county, Forsyth County, we've lost 7 children since I became aware of the disease to childhood cancer. So, a lot of times you hear the term, it's rare, but it's really not. And once it hits close to home, you kind of can't stay silent about it. And so that's why I'm here, is because I don't want to stay silent about it, and I hope that you will join us in that fight. Like Representative Gilligan said, there is no cost to this other than bringing awareness to a truly horrific disease and supporting families and children fighting it everywhere. So I just thank you so much for giving this opportunity to be here and to be here before you today.
Thank you, Ms. Chamberlain. This affected a child in my church, and it was just devastating. I do appreciate the interest you have. Does anybody have a question for Ms. Chamberlain? Okay, I don't see any. Thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming down to Atlanta just to talk about this. All right. Does any member of the committee want to discuss this or have any question or make a motion? Number 27 first. I'll let Colonel Prince do it first. How about that?
Do pass.
Okay, and do pass. And then second? Very good. All in favor say aye. All opposed say nay. The ayes have it.
Thank
Go
you
to
very
rules.
much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Congratulations. The next bill we have is H.R. 239 by Chairman Ron Stevens of Savannah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This won't take very long. It's all this resolution does is it designates the Savannah Logistics Technology Innovation Corridor as one of the official technology innovation corridors in Georgia. That's simply all that it does. It just highlights the areas. You might know logistics in Savannah is pretty central to the state. Got 500,000 jobs that are associated with the Georgia ports. And of course, this does nothing but just put a spotlight on what we already do. It includes our Representative Gordon's home, I might add.
And I note that Savannah is now the 4th largest port in America, which is amazing. It's
Yes, sir.
Yes,
And
sir.
the single largest port on the East Coast.
okay, very good. Thank you, Chairman Stevens, for your testimony today. Number 4, Representative Prince.
Thank you, Representative Stevens, for bringing this. I tell you, a lot of people may think these are just words. However, I tell you now that it means a lot, especially to get business and moving in that area. I can speak for Augusta. We're now the cyber corridor, and I tell you that has done a lot of things that people just can't see until businesses start coming and they start focusing. Anytime you hear cyber, you think Augusta. Anytime we hear logistics, a lot of people think Savannah. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative Prince.
Any other questions for Chairman Stevens? Any member on the committee wants to speak to the bill? This time, could I get a motion for a pass or do not pass? Got a motion to do pass, second? Second, very good. All in favor say aye. Very good. All opposed say nay. The ayes have it. You're on the rules.
Thank you,
Congratulations, Mr. Chairman.
Members of the committee.
Thanks, sir. Okay, next one we're going to have is entertained is H.R. 196 by Representative Billy Mitchell.
Thank Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I must start off by saying I can think of no better reason of giving up your service than this consideration of this matter that is before you. The Equalization Fund, which was set up in 1985, is supposed to provide greater equity in school funding for systems with lower property taxes, lower property tax bases. It was often thought of as a way to help poor and rural districts that can raise little from property taxes, but the collapse of the real estate market in recent years has changed the equation such that the largest grants in recent years have gone to districts that are neither rural nor poor. I might remind you all here that the governor did a great thing, and we applauded our efforts a couple of years ago when we fully funded the equalization grant. The governor put in an additional $40 million supposedly into all of Georgia's struggling school districts. But what happened was that according to the Georgia Department of Education, most of the money went to one county, Gwinnett County, and a little bit went to Clayton and Paulding County. As a result, just to give you a perfect example of what is happening because of the fall in the real estate market, Gwinnett County is scheduled to invest $54 million in technology improvements in their school system this year alone. By contrast, the superintendent of Quitman County made mention that he has 345 students. 1 mil in Gwinnett would fund their schools for 10 years. He also went on to say that the present equalization formula is anything but equal. And it was a formula that was designed some years ago. I don't know how many of you know Dr. Solquest from Georgia State. He's a funding expert that the state used. He's with the Georgia State University's Andrews Young School of Public Policy. He has even made a suggestion that we also start to consider income of the counties when we do this equalization grant. So in an effort not to just willy-nilly pick out solutions and write up a bill, this is an issue that is certainly worthy of study. To get solutions, suggestions, bring back to our colleagues in the legislature, and to see how we may improve the basic equalization grant. As I said, being as much as education is one of the largest appropriations that this state makes, to find a fair and equitable way that we can educate our children would be, now even Gwinnett, who gets the lion's share of the equalization grant, admits that this is an issue that needs to be addressed.
Okay, thank you, Representative Mitchell. Any questions? First, we have number 22, Representative Donahue.
Good afternoon there, Representative.
Good to
Quick
hear you.
question. As we spoke, you said this was a great bill, and I truly believe you believe that. And the question I want to ask, and when I ask most of the time, is have you done a physical note on the cost of this study committee and what that will be?
And that's a great question, and I want you all to absorb the question he just asked. I assume, knowing Representative Donahue as I do, he is concerned about the state's resources, so he is asking what the cost will be. The cost of us doing nothing is about $40–50 million a year, so whatever the cost is for this study committee pales in comparison to us spending $40–50 million a year and it not being a great equalization grant. To be quite honest with you, with the number of members on the study committee, the per diem is what, 156. I'm talking about maybe a couple of $1,000.
Let me further another question, and thank you. And those numbers, were they actual numbers that you know and you saw? I'm just making sure.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Now, with that, Quitman has how many students, you said?
345.
And Gwinnett has?
I don't know the number of Gwinnett.
Largest school system in the state.
That is correct.
So comparing that, and I understand, I'm not putting it down. I'm just trying to get the broader scope here. With QBE, you're looking at Here, you're saying if you take a little from them and give a little to just
No,
Quitman or certain regions?
No, that's what I'm not saying. I'm saying that the superintendent of Quitman
Made the
used
statement.
that as an example of how inequitable the system is now.
Right.
Whereas you have a very wealthy school system that is getting the lion's share. And when the equalization grants were created, it was to go to just the opposite. Those systems that were poor and in need and could not raise the kind of money from their millage rate that a Gwinnett could.
Can I continue?
Absolutely.
Thank you. One more
Yeah,
question.
one more question.
With that, so how would we, the poorer section, how would we raise them out from, as we said, poorer? What would you recommend, not knowing exactly those areas right down there, and you represent them and you're passionate about it? I want to know, just to kind of wrap my mind around what you're
Once
talking
again, this is an extraordinary question, and I want you all to absorb this, what he's asked, so when we get to voting on this.
Been hanging around Al Williams too long.
The reality is this: there are any number of suggestions on how to make this fair. As a matter of fact, my initial intent was to just draft a bill to change the equal. There were so many recommendations on how we could improve this that I thought that it would be better to entertain a lot of suggestions, and a committee comes up with the best to suggest to our members. As I mentioned earlier, Dr. Solquist, once again a state tax and funding expert at Georgia State University, Andrews Young School of Policy, he recommended that you take personal wealth into the equation, which would help places like Quitman County, where household income is about half of what Gwinnett's. That's one suggestion, that you not only look at property values if they're falling, maintaining, or rising, but you also look at the wealth of the county as well.
Thank you very much. Representative Prince.
Thank you, Chairman. Representative Mitchell, I look forward to this study committee, and I ask that if it goes forward and is granted, that we also take a look at the Freeport tax. That's a tax that, and I'm surprised. I mean, I just seeing this. I wish I had an opportunity to sign off as one of the sponsors, because that's something in my school system in Richmond County, which is a large school system, but that's something that we're dealing with as we try to attract businesses to the local area. We're basically giving them tax breaks, which is still a part of this equation. That so basically losing money when we try to bring business in and give tax breaks. So
Absolutely. I think that's a great idea. And let me just point out to you, and that raises a great point. Every one of the superintendents that work, that represent the districts you're in, I'm not talking about just some, every one of them want this kind of study to be conducted. I think that you will be relegated as a hero amongst your community, the districts you represent, should this pass.
Representative Carter.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Representative Mitchell, for bringing this resolution and do a study committee. It looked like you are asking for 5 people on the committee, so it looks like that'll cost around $875 plus mileage per meeting. Not really sure how many meetings, but at 5 meetings, it's less than $5,000. But my question, the education equalization grant is what you're asking to be studied, so that there is some recommendation to come back, and that grant will be a part of the QBE, because we know there are a lot of moving parts with QBE. Now, are you? And I just want to be clear, you're not asking for a study on QBE, but only the equalization grant.
Yeah, there's a formula that we use for the equalization grant, and we need to study that formula, because the formula that was put in place in 1985 is patently unfair today.
Oh, absolutely. I understand that. I just wanted to be clear that everybody's clear
Yes.
that what you're asking us to consider is to approving a study committee to study the education equalization grant that will ultimately affect the funding, but you're not making suggestions. I just want to be clear. You're just saying, let's take the time and study it
absolutely.
so that we can come back and make some recommendation. And you're only asking for 5 people on that committee. Like I said, it's about $875
Right.
a meeting.
You know, being a conservative myself, I want to emphasize to you that I want to be a great steward of the taxpayers' money. You know, some of you tax and spend legislators, we need to get a handle on this very seriously as to what the tax and how the taxpayer dollars are being spent. And this is a great way to do that and to make certain that it is going to exactly how it's intended. There's some students in counties like Quitman that if we don't act, they will be certainly disenfranchised when it comes to being educated.
Thank you, Representative Mitchell. I have a couple questions. Has this been done before? Has the DOE or the governor's office of student achievement, have they looked at this before? Is that true?
They did not. It was put in place in 1985, and it has not been studied since.
Okay. And so you're hoping, you think that the rich should pay more to the poor, or that they're paying too much in the rich counties to the poor counties?
I'm like Governor Deal said after he fully funded the $40 million. He said he had no idea this was going to happen.
Okay.
And so I'm like that as well. I thought we did a good thing when we fully funded it.
Definitely, yeah.
Then once the money went to where it go, we were all astonished that based on the formula that is law, this is what happened. And even the biggest benefactor of the money said, okay, this is what, you know, interestingly enough, they didn't turn down the money, but the fact of the matter is even they said that this was not fair.
Okay. Representative Carter, one more question, then we'll move on.
I just want to be clear, because based on the chairman's question, it sounds like he's thinking that you have recommendations. I just want to be clear that you're asking for there to be a study, and after the study, there'll be recommendations.
Absolutely.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you very much. Any other member wants to talk to the bill just briefly? Representative Mitchell, really appreciate it. We'll be getting back with you, and I appreciate your testimony.
Thank you.
Next one's going to be H.R. 291 by Representative Samuel Park. Is he here? Very good, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Belton, members of the committee. I'm here to present House Resolution 291, LC 460102. So this is a study committee to find out ways in which we can expand access to after-school programs. And it makes sense as to why we need to do so. First, I'll go through some facts and, of course, open to take any questions. Currently, after-school programs, they serve about 280,000 young people in Georgia, but yet nearly more than 600,000 Georgians would enroll in a program if there were one available in their community. And it makes sense as to why. After-school programs have been demonstrated to increase educational outcomes for students and also build or help build safer communities. If we look at those children who participated in after-school programs under the federal 21st Century Community Learning Centers, 80% of children who participated in increased homework completion, 70% who participated in improved classroom behavior, 73 to 74% improved their English and math grades. Anyone who participates in after-school programs, their likelihood or chance of graduating from high school has also been demonstrated to increase, and we all understand the importance of graduating from high school. Some of the statistics that really popped out, particularly in regards to the public safety aspect, is the time period in which most violent crimes committed by juveniles are committed. So there are about 317,000 unsupervised youth between the periods of 3 and 6 or 7 p.m. During that same window of time where these kids are unsupervised, about 19% of juvenile crimes occur. So expanding access to these after-school programs that create a space, a nurturing educational environment for these students has twofold benefits, to improve their chances of graduating from high school as well as helping our communities be safer. There are a few other additional benefits I wanted to just mention. One would be the immediate and long-term savings and benefits to taxpayers. There's estimates saying that up to $154 million could be saved by increasing access to these high-quality after-school programs. Those savings would come from reduced drug and alcohol dependence, from reducing grade retention, from reducing juvenile crime, and long-term reduction or reliance on welfare systems. So what this after-school study committee would do, or one of the reasons why I think this issue needs to be looked at, would be to better understand some of the challenges, both financial and geographic, that exist that perhaps inhibit participation, the needs and challenges of existing after-school programs, both state and federal funding sources, and ways in which we can begin partnering with existing providers. And that would include public schools, religious organizations, private schools, YMCAs, and Boys and Girls Clubs of Georgia. Those 5 that I named are the largest current providers of after-school programs. One thing I would also like to note is, in terms of the membership of this committee, if you look at lines 26 to line 30, we have included an after-school provider, 4 additional positions, one being an after-school provider, a representative from the Georgia Department of Education, a representative representing working families, and someone to represent K through 12, the K through 12th grade. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Does any member of the committee have a question for Representative Park? I do. Why 7? Usually it's 5 members. Just curious why you came up with the number 7 members.
I think some of the after-school providers, they wanted to ensure that they would also have a seat at the table. It wasn't for any specific other reason other than wanting to make sure that everyone who's involved with after-schools has a seat at the table.
So it's 7 House members, right? And then 4 other members, is that correct? Is that
That is correct. And I'd be open to making changes to that as
Okay.
well.
Representative Prince?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Park. Again, I just want to make sure I understand this. This is to study after-school programs that are already in existence.
So it would be to find out how to increase the demand of after-school programs, or how to expand access to after-school programs by looking at what we currently have and areas in which we can expand access. So, for example, there are about, I think I said 200.
So are we studying those who do not attend after-school programs?
I think that would be a component of it. So, for example, if there's a child who wants to attend an after-school program but may not be capable of doing so, understanding some of the barriers that exist, whether they're financial or what have you.
Or they're involved in other activities such as sports and things like that, so they can't make it to the Boys and Girls Club or those types of things?
I think that could be a source of inquiry.
Okay,
as
I'm
well.
just trying to make sure.
Thank you, Representative Prince. I must warn you that I started this. The reason I'm here today is because I started volunteering for after-school programs, so you could have more people like me, which would be terrible. Number 23.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Park, Representative Park, for being here today. I just want to ask you about your knowledge of daycare systems or daycare centers. So they usually take children up to maybe age 12. Is that correct?
If yes.
So then there's a gap after that,
Mhm.
that parents that have children that are older than 12, if they're not in a Boys and Girls Club, then they're latchkey, they're going home alone, they're doing a lot of stuff at home that maybe they shouldn't do. So there's definitely a need for after-school care for children in this age group that you are bringing. So I want to commend you for that. I have children myself. I have grandchildren that are falling into the same predicament, and it's extremely expensive to provide aftercare for children. So I think it's a great idea, and I appreciate you looking into it or suggesting this study.
Thank you. With my district, I represent 2 high schools that demonstrate a lot of the changing demographics in Gwinnett. a lot of the high school students currently, middle and high school students in my district, they are, from the low status on the socioeconomic ladder. So I think trying to find as many ways in which we can increase educational and economic opportunities is vitally important for the long term.
Just one more thing.
Of course.
Chairman. So I've talked to several parents about the same thing. One person mentioned to me that they had spent over $20,000 in child care, and I think that's a number that most Americans cannot afford. That's some people's annual salary. So I think there's definitely a need for it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any more questions for Representative Park? Okay, we'll go on to Katie Lands. If you'd like to speak to the bill, please tell us who you are, who you represent, and you're for or against.
Yes, thank you again for this opportunity today. I'm Katie Landis. I'm director of the Georgia Statewide After School Network, and we are in support of this study committee. First, I want to say that the Georgia Statewide After School Network, and in partnership with Voices for Georgia's Children, we fully believe that all children and working families should have access to high quality, enriching, and affordable opportunities after the school day ends. These programs, going on what Representative Park said, they not only provide a safe place for working parents to send their children while they can stay in their jobs after that school day ends, but it's also a place where they can build upon school day learning, provide opportunities for physical activity, and expose young people to new interests and ideas like the arts and STEM. Addressing Representative's question around daycare and after age 12, yes, it is true that most daycare centers really only do serve up until age 12, and a lot of these after-school programs are that key place where they can provide workforce development skills. We're seeing so many more programs across the state connecting young people and teens to really meaningful internships while also giving them the skills, those soft skills that they need, where employers are more and more saying they need young people to have to come in and be really meaningful employees in the workforce that we have in Georgia. Currently across Georgia, there are a wide variety of after-school programs serving kids ages 5 through 18. These include some of what you heard: Boys and Girls Clubs, school-based programs, YMCAs, 4-H, parks and rec centers, and faith-based programs. Thanks to federal funding and Georgia's allocation of TANF dollars, over 100,000 young people most in need have access to these programs for low or no cost currently. This includes Georgia's 21st Century Community Learning Centers that you heard a bit about, which is administered through the Georgia Department of Education. That program funds right around 250 after-school programs across Georgia, and a recent study that we did shows a clear link between engagement in these programs with reduced grade level retention and improved school day attendance. Additionally, the Division of Family and Children Services after-school care program supports 250 additional more after-school programs, providing that same academic support, teen internships, and many other critical workforce skills to young people across Georgia. But we know, as you heard from Representative Park, that there are many more children in Georgia without access to these high-quality, affordable experiences. Currently, 66 of Georgia's counties do not have an after-school program that is funded by one of those two largest funding streams that I just mentioned. And according to Georgia parents, nearly 600,000 more kids across Georgia would be enrolled in program if one was currently available to them. This study committee could be a great opportunity to really examine as a state what is going well in Georgia's after-school programs, where there are some critical gaps in access across the state, and what other states, including some of our peers in Tennessee, Kansas, and Arkansas, have done to build upon the success of some of these federally funded programs that currently support thousands of working families across Georgia.
Okay, thank you very much. I know the Boys and Girls Club in my city are probably the best thing we ever did, and there's a lot of great results. Any questions for Ms. Lands from the committee? Okay, thank you, Mr. Park, for your testimony, and we'll consider the bill. Thank you. We saved the best for last. H.R. 38 by Representative Kendrick. And she has a couple of people will be talking to the bill.
afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members
Good
of the
afternoon.
committee. I have Mr. Rodney Sampson, who is a professor at Morehouse, and he is going to give some on-the-ground, real-world perspectives on what I'm trying to do. So HR 38 is to create a study committee for HBCUs, which is historically black colleges and universities. And it is a study committee specifically with the focus on how can the state of Georgia partner with our Georgia HBCUs, there are 10 of them, particularly in the area of STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and math. Many of you know that I do a lot of work in the technology industry. So HBCUs were established back in the day because historically, black people could not go to historically or to predominantly white colleges and universities. And so there are currently 101 HBCUs in the United States, and that is down from 121 when HBCUs started back in the 1930s. You may know that there are some notable people from Georgia and otherwise that graduated from HBCUs, but a few of them are Ralph David Abernathy, who graduated from CAU, of course, Dr. Martin Luther King, who graduated from Morehouse College, Thurgood Marshall, who graduated from Howard University School of Law, and so many people who have benefited from HBCUs, particularly the ones that are in Georgia. If you take a look at the study committee, as I mentioned, there are 10 of them, and they're listed in lines 3 through 6. And there's some other additional information related to the percentage of bachelor degrees that are awarded in STEM fields from HBCUs. And so this study committee, as I stated, is to specifically focus on STEM careers and how can HBCUs become integrated into Georgia's technology community. Most of you may have heard on the news about HBCU Bennett College and their struggles with accreditation. If you have not heard that story, they have since gotten the accreditation back, but it's one of the HBCUs that is located in Greensboro, and it was put on probation by the accrediting institution because of some finances, and they were able to raise, I want to say like $9.5 million from 13,000 different donors, and the accreditation was still taken away from them, but a judge reversed a couple of days ago their accreditation, so they're working through those issues. But HBCUs are vitally important, particularly in the state of Georgia, that is the cradle of the civil rights movement, and so this is another way that Georgia can continue to if they really want to be #1 state to do business, really support and wrap their hands around the fabulous HBCUs that we have here in the state of Georgia. And I don't know if you want to take questions or hear from Mr. Sampson. But
Go ahead, Mr. Sampson.
All right, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be before you today. I think it's also interesting to note that with over 10,000 open and available computing jobs in Georgia, it's incredible that it's an incredible opportunity for all of our colleges and universities, including our technical colleges in the state, but particularly our historically black colleges and universities, to consider what their curriculums look like for the future of work as we lead to the fourth industrial revolution with automation and advanced manufacturing and AI and machine learning and all the things that we saw in the Matrix and didn't think was real. But actually is coming to pass, right? So I think it's incredibly important for us to have this study committee to be able to look at those curriculums in particular, but at the same time create and foster industry relationships. And just one simple thing that the study committee asks is that when companies come to the state looking to be located here or have an HQ2 here, to actually just even know that these 10 historically black colleges and universities exist, because when I've said in Metro Atlanta Chamber meetings or hosted companies, when they come, they always ask about access to Black and Latinx talent. It always comes up. So I think by having this study committee and by just some tweaks in terms of how we look at economic development and attraction and retention, but also new venture creation. And I'll close with this. Some of your most successful high growth technology startup entrepreneurs have attended HBCUs, whether it's Dr. Paul Judge, who came out of Morehouse College, then went on to get a PhD at Georgia Tech, or the Rodney Williams from Howard, or the only African-American woman in the world who has ever sold a company to Amazon, Jewel Burks, went to Howard University, and she built her startup here right in Atlanta. So thank you for listening. Available for any questions.
Thank you, very good. So you mentioned the Matrix. Are you a red pill kind of guy or a blue pill kind of guy?
I'm all the way in, man.
All the way in, all down the rabbit hole. All right.
Straight down.
All right. Any questions for Representative Kendrick? Number 3, Mr. Representative Beverly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For a point of clarification, HBCUs were started about 180 years ago to address a need for underrepresented black folk in fields that were emerging. And at that time, they were agriculture, mechanical, and industrial. Today, 180 years later, there's a new, as you say, fourth industrial revolution, where the new jobs, you can't but turn on the TV and see that black folk are not being represented in these areas of STEM. And so it seems to me that in the tradition of what HBCUs were set out to do, that you guys want to continue that work into this new industrial revolution by looking at STEM as an opportunity for folk who are black and Latina who are going to these schools to have an opportunity to actually do good work in these fields. Is that correct?
That is correct. And it's sort of kind of a rising tide opportunity. If we take people of color in this state, I think, make up 39% of the state of Georgia. A lot of us are disproportionately, underwater when it comes to net worth and wealth accumulation. By ensuring that the poorest of us who may not traditionally have knowledge of and/or access to the skills of the future, if they can get them, it would create more income mobility and economic opportunity for the state as a whole. So, absolutely.
Thank Representative Robertson, number 25.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you for being here. Quick question. Could you give me any examples of any current work that's being done in this area of enhancing and looking for those advancements by any of our traditional HBC college universities? But also, would the work or this committee have any way in which it would enhance that work or hinder it from your perspective?
If I may, I think it would enhance it. But first, let me talk about some of the initiatives. So I co-sponsor a innovation, technology, and actually blockchain, talk about a rabbit hole, blockchain lab on the campus of Morehouse that is serving the entire Atlanta University Center today. There's that opportunity allows us to connect with a lot of the corporate innovation labs through the Tiger program between Morehouse College and Georgia Tech. So there's not sort of this, isolated approach. It's a very inclusive approach of students being able to take classes from Morehouse and Spelman and Clark over at Georgia Tech. Because of the partnership we've created, now the technology companies that are mostly housed over at Georgia Tech in the Technology Square area are now actually coming over to the Atlanta University Center to facilitate workshops and to offer paid summer internship opportunities as well. You're also seeing the curriculums, they're starting to be enhanced. The computer science curriculum, I know Morehouse and Spelman are now offering Python as a language for incoming freshmen, which is a high demand computer language as well. And so you're starting to see those initiatives. Spelman has a planned Innovation and Arts Center, and they recently received a $30 million grant. But even with all of that, it's very nascent, and I will say this, what's good for the HBCUs is good for everybody, but I think there's some, there should be a particular focus on helping these organizations explore, particularly because they're under-sourced and under-resourced and don't have the alumni support and the alumni giving that our predominantly white institutions have, just because of the ages of accumulation of wealth in this country, transparently on the backs of Black Americans who were enslaved and came through Jim Crow and came through unjust housing and not having access to opportunity. And you've seen people overcome, but we just haven't had the opportunity to accumulate that wealth and give it back to our alma mater like we'd like to. hopefully that answers the question.
Representative Clark?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To both of you, first of all, Representative Kendrick, thank you for this resolution. I come from a STEM background myself as a computer software engineer. Do you know what programs are currently in Fort Valley State? I come from Middle Georgia, Warner Robins. Fort Valley State's right next door. Do you know what programs are at Fort Valley State? Because I am interested in whether it's Mercer, Fort Valley State, Middle Georgia State, creating more STEM programs at our universities, whether it's engineering or computer science, to feed a pipeline into Robins Air Force Base, and then also create in Middle Georgia, a cyber-based or technology-based private sector that brings in the human resources that can also funnel in to supporting Robins Air Force Base in that area. So do you know of what programs are there currently, or what needs to be created there that we could do through this study committee?
Well, I toured Fort Valley State, I want to say 2 years ago, at the request of the president then, and they were identifying a building that they owned in downtown, I guess it's Fort Valley, that they wanted to convert into an innovation center. They own the building outright, and they wanted to create something that had sort of the intersection between agriculture and technology. So they have the building. Funding and resources were required to get the building up to code and kind of make it look like one of those cool, OHUBs or WeWorks or what have you.
Right.
When it comes to a training component, I think there's an incredible opportunity to take the coding boot camp model, which takes a 3 to 6 month accelerated path to getting a certificate in a particular coding language to make you employable. I think HBCUs and technical colleges would be amazing places to launch these boot camps and then, partner with industry. Because particularly our federal government, they're looking for a ton of software developers that can have a wraparound of cybersecurity, because we've got to have a lot of what you call ethical white hackers to keep the bad hackers out. So.
Right. And by white hackers, he means the good hackers that
Good.
prevent software.
Yeah.
He's not talking about white folk, okay?
Y'all know good equals white, you know that.
All right, we have one more question, and because we got 4 more people who want to speak to this bill. So, Ms. Hobson, number 17.
Thank you, Chairman.
Representative Hobson.
Thank you, and thank you for your information regarding this. As a HBCU graduate, as well as a STEM graduate, previously serving as a software engineer and now serving as a cybersecurity engineer, I appreciate this. In the piece where you talk about the touring from the various companies, I would just also ask that you incorporate some type of aggressive way to help get students positions once they obtain their various STEM degrees, because as I won't say how many years, but having a number of years in the STEM industry, it's definitely it continues to be underrepresented. So just please ensure that you kind of make sure we got some jobs out there for the kids once they're done.
That's, if I could address, that's incredibly important. Through our Business Opportunity Hub, we run a program called HBCU at South by Southwest, which is annually in Austin, Texas, at the big tech conference where about 500,000 people come. And we host about 40 tech companies that come down to hire and talk to students. And we have a 90% placement rate. So the companies are now saying that they want diverse tech talent and that we should be producing more of that. So absolutely to your point.
Yep.
Okay, we have 4 people want to speak to the bill. So we've passed our allotted hour, but we'll make sure we get to that. Evan Alford, please. Aaron Alford. Alfred.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Erin Alford. I'm a junior political science major at Spelman College and legislative aide to Representative Darshan Kendrick. And I'm here to speak to the question why HBCUs in 2019 are still relevant. HBCUs were created to grant recently emancipated slaves an opportunity to pursue higher education when virtually no other colleges would. Although some may argue that times have progressed, HBCUs now are more important than ever and continue to improve the education gap in America today. With a primary focus on education of African American students, historically black colleges and universities foster relationships that push African American culture that is essentially buried in state curriculum. At other institutions, a student may enroll in an African American history course. However, at an HBCU, students live through that culture, which is ultimately an experience that cannot be quantified. Taking HR 38 into consideration and speaking directly to HBCUs in STEM, a study conducted by the United Negro College Fund finds that HBCUs produce 70% of black dentists and 50% of black engineers. An additional study in 2013 conducted by the National Science Report finds that 21 of the top 50 institutions that produce black science and engineering PhDs are HBCUs. Ultimately, these institutions grant students opportunities that may not have existed without HBCUs. They serve as a channel that provides a culture that builds confidence and grants students essential skills needed to cultivate a career. In sum, although predominantly white institutions have done a great job at welcoming black students, there is still nothing like the impact of learning alongside students of color. Attending an HBCU has been socially liberating and has provided me with confidence, perseverance, and the drive that is needed to be a black collegiate woman in America. Mr. Chairman and committee, I thank you for your time and I appreciate your consideration for HR 38.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Representative Parrish?
Thank you, Chairman. So I'm looking at it from a job standpoint and lifting the income of African Americans, because I think this is a direct correlation, and it's a place where we can get in and increase financial net worth. So can you give me, what are the numbers on financial net worth of average African American family? I'd like to know.
Median net worth of a black family today is $17,000. Latinx or Hispanic American family, $20,000. Median for Asian American, $100,000, and for white American, over $171,000. By 2053, median net worth of a black family is projected to be zero. So it actually is declining. Starting salaries for computing jobs average across the country are like $70,000 for entry level, first and 2 years on the East Coast, and they go into the six figures pretty quickly. So combined with some financial literacy and some wealth creation, education, you can literally close the wealth gap with getting people of color and people that are poor in general, because remember those numbers are median. Yes. There's a lot of poor black people, poor white people, poor everybody.
For everybody.
For everybody. And this is a path to future opportunities for everybody.
Absolutely. And you quoted 10,000 plus tech jobs that are available in the state right now?
Yeah, that's code.org information.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Parrish. Courtney Spence, is that right? Courtney Spencer?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members, for allowing me to be here to talk about my experience as a student and now alumni of an HBCU. Again, my name is Courtney Spencer, very excited to be here with you today. One of the things about an HBCU is that it gives us the opportunity to be connected to the Black culture and heritage and instills self-identity and esteem for students. It also inspires African Americans to seek higher learning in the institutions that their forefathers built and attended. Quite simply put, they produce excellence. I would just like to talk about a few of my family members. Daji Hendricks, she currently serves as Birmingham City Council Board of Education, District 4. She is a graduate of Clark Atlanta University. My cousin Gaynell Hendricks, she's the tax assessor for Jefferson County, which is in Birmingham, and she's a graduate of Lemoyne-Owen. My cousin Elias Hendricks, he served faithfully on Birmingham's City Council. He's a graduate of Clark Atlanta. My father, Lee Spencer, is a retired lieutenant with the Columbus Fire Department, and a hero, is a graduate of Albany State University. And myself, I am a 40 under 40 winner, a seasoned Chamber of Commerce professional, and an educator, and I am a graduate of the unsinkable Albany State University. They produce excellence, and if this is a fraction of what they produce, they are more than relevant. they are essential. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for your very powerful testimony. Jamie Beasley. Does anyone have a question for Ms. Spencer? Jamie Beasley, please. I'm sorry, you have a question, Ms. Hobson, Representative Hobson?
No question, but thank you, ASU. Love it.
Absolutely. In the words of Portia Holmes Shields.
That's Jamie Beasley.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for hearing me today. So everyone has already said all the stats that I already had written down, so I'm just going to speak from the heart. I'm currently a doctoral student at Clark Atlanta University in the Department of Political Science. I have a master's in public administration, also from Clark Atlanta University with a focus in public policy. I did my undergraduate career at Kennesaw State University, and I'm here to say that at Clark Atlanta University, I feel more safe. I feel culturally, I feel like the administration is culturally competent. All of these things have led me to be the successful student that I am today. Back in 2015, when I graduated from Kennesaw State, the cultural climate there was very toxic, and it in fact was very dangerous for students of color. So in a time where we think that we have progressed past all these racial inequalities, HBCUs are still very important because they foster a sense of safety. And so all these things are important, again, when we're trying to further, particularly students of color's educational opportunity. So I don't want to take up too much time, but I just wanted to make sure that I really focus on the cultural competency part of being at a HBCU. So thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions? Thank you very much. Appreciate that. The last one will be Horace Williams, please.
Hello, everyone. So I'm gonna put my phone here so I make sure I don't talk too long. But so a couple of quick things. The first thing is that like several of the others that showed up to the podium, I am also an HBCU grad. Went to North Carolina A&T, and before I get into my personal story, there's one thing I do want to highlight that I think is a major opportunity for Georgia, particularly around the economic impact of HBCUs, and something that we are very much well positioned to take advantage of. I'm originally born and raised in New York, right? And there weren't any HBCUs in New York City. So a lot of the very talented and well-educated, well-to-do, African-American males in New York City leave to go to HBCUs in other states, even when they are accepted to what we consider to be top-tier institutions, PWIs or so on and so forth. But Georgia's number 3 in HBCUs. So there's an opportunity with this committee here and with what we're trying to do to further market those HBCUs nationwide and continue to bring in talent from other states to come here and then stay here because of what's available to those students post-graduation. So just keep that in mind as well, too, because my experience is very personal, but just from a business standpoint, there's a lot of unique opportunity in that particular aspect that we can take advantage of. The next thing is that I went to a very prestigious high school in New York City called St. Francis Xavier. Almost fell down. St. Francis was about 8% black, and the faculty represented that populace as such, right? And there wasn't a lot of intimate care for the students, not because people didn't care, but you have to just remember when you're dealing in numbers and you're dealing with, representation, right? It's still only 8% that can, lobby to have more of a diverse teacher base, and that's not a lot, right? So you kind of have to deal with what you have. And, we just didn't get that hands-on care. So if we didn't have it at home or if we weren't essentially producing at the level that we should be, we came subject to the system. We basically, there was almost an inside joke about how many black kids failed out of my high school every year. I applied to North Carolina A&T. I got in on academic probation. And my very first year, it was a woman named Dr. Phoenix. And she said, Horace, listen, you're answering all the questions in my class, but you're getting 70s on my tests. And I want to know why. And she sat down and she studied with me for 2 hours, and did so several times after that, to the point where I realized that there were inaccuracies and inconsistencies in the way that I was studying, which was hindering my ability to perform properly. That was just one of several teachers that provided me opportunities through that process, which then led me to graduate, going from getting kicked out of high school to graduating from A&T in 3 years, cum laude. Post that, if you want to talk about my personal economic impact, I've been a part of 3 startups. I'm in my 4th one, which I founded. 2 of the 4 were acquired, by which I was a key employee in those acquisitions. I've co-authored 3 patents, and I have, I was an Oracle executive at 29 years old. And I can tell you right now that had my path stopped prior to North Carolina A&T, none of this would have been possible. So 2 just quick takeaways. One is that I'm not unique. There are several people like me that come from places that just need opportunities. And those opportunities are often not presented to people like me until they go to HBCUs. And the other thing is that, my economic impact is not unique either. There are several people, like Rodney mentioned and like several others have mentioned, that have gone through that system and have directly benefited the communities where these HBCUs reside. So luckily, I left North Carolina A&T and came to Georgia so I could help with y'all economy. No, just being funny. But I say that to close out and say, don't let that be the case with other graduates from the schools that you have here. There's a lot of opportunity in Georgia. So just make sure you maximize. We want to do this, and it's a small ask. This resolution is a very small ask for something that can have a really substantial impact. So, I just wanted to make sure all those grounds got covered. I'm obviously in support of the bill, and thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Any questions? Thank you very much. Really strong presentation. Again, we will not be voting on this today, but we'll keep this in reference, and we'll be, any questions, any more comments from the committee before we adjourn? Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. We're adjourned.